Morning or good afternoon or whatever time you're watching. My name is Alex. Welcome back to the channel. Kind of like want to talk about the subject of today, which is where's EFI tuning and then the platform ideally you should be choosing as a beginner. Now EFI tuning stands for electronic fuel injection, which is basically ECU controlling the amount of fuel that goes into the engine with the use of fuel injectors. Now, as for like carburetor tuning and stuff like that, that's manually, that's a whole different gameplay and a whole other different story. So getting back to EFI, ideally what platform you should be choosing as a beginner, because obviously you want something that's easy and then kind of like you got room for errors, different type of errors you are going to be doing. In terms of platforms, pretty much you got piston engines and then rotary engines that obviously fall into two categories: naturally aspirated, or NA of some people call them, and then forced induction, which is going to be like either turbocharged or supercharged, or maybe, you never know, sometimes a combination of both. Now I would tend to lean on to the piston side of engines if you are a beginner, because rotary engines are reliable, don't get me wrong, despite what people say out there. If you know what you're doing, rotary engines are quite reliable. If you don't though, then it kind of like falls into the category that it can pretty much end up as like a big rebuild project in the first week, if you know what I'm saying. So yeah, if you're not familiar with rotary engines, I leave them for the time being and then go for a piston engine. Now, depending on what setup you have, I would, if I were to choose, I would go for a naturally aspirated engine. Main reason because if it's a turbocharged or supercharged engine, the engine, there's a lot more stress onto the engine, obviously because of boost, and everything happens a lot faster, so the room for error is going to be quite a bit less rather than a naturally aspirated engine. Reason being, hence why my platform I chose the EP3 is a K20 engine, which is a 2 litre naturally aspirated engine. Now, depending the platform that you choose, so whatever engine you are going to be choosing, one thing to consider is the aftermarket support in terms of both hardware and software. Now, in terms of hardware, is it like simple as, can you get like a exhaust system on your car, intake, maybe manifolds, camshafts, whatever like you whatever like mod you want to do on your car, can you get it? Or is it comes down to the point that it might be something that is, well, either if you choose to like obviously make your own parts, or you need to pay someone to make custom parts for your car. Obviously that's more to the expensive side compared to like buying. But if you already got the CNC machine and then all that kind of like fancy equipment, then it might be cheaper for you depending on what you do for a living. Software support is going to be obviously some cars, they get supported by reflash, different companies that do reflash. So for instance, it's going to be like Honda, you can use Hondata on them because basically that's built for Hondas. I think Subis or no VWs or whatever, like VAG Group, they got Corp for as like a reflash software. Evo Subis, they got other like companies. Can't remember all the names, but if you do some research, you can find like whether your car is you can do a software like reflash software on it. The other option is getting another brain for the car, which is getting another standalone ECU. That's what they're called. There's different companies out there: Haltech, Link, Motec. There's other ones as well. Just like these ones, the ones that come on top of my head. That basically, depending on what model of ECU you do, some companies supply plug and play kits for your car. Other ones they might not, and then it's going to be just a case of universal wiring harness. Now the nice thing about plug and play kits is they're easy. You get the ECU, standalone ECU, whatever which one you get, and then it comes with a direct connector that plugs into your OEM wiring harness. Obviously if it's in good shape, you don't want to like put it up in a messy one that's going to have loads of problems. So it directly fits into your wiring harness, straight fit, and then you just crack on with tuning. Pretty simple. Now if it doesn't, then you have the option of the universal wiring harness that obviously connects to your standalone ECU, but obviously being a universal wiring harness, the other end is open leads, and then you're going to have to wire in the harness yourself. or if you want to pay another guy that does this for a living and then knows what he's doing, because obviously not a lot of people are like confident with wiring in their ECU. Now back to me, why I got the platform of why I chose the EP3 platform. As my setup is, EP3 does come with the K20 engine in it, which for a lot of people that know the K series engines, the well, basically everybody loves them out there in the aftermarket world, and they are widely supported. So whether you want to do some basic mods all the way to some crazy 1000 horsepower builds, turbocharging it, whatever, supercharged, drag racing it, you know, whatever you want to do. So aftermarket support on those is pretty much like, no doubt, you're gonna pretty much anything you're gonna look for, you can find it out there from different companies, obviously at different price ranges. That's the research for you to do. In terms of the engine itself, obviously being the K20 and the AP3 is a 2-litre naturally aspirated engine, and then as with any engine in general, whether it's a V8 or whatever, V6, turbocharged, supercharged, the two main things that you are going to be doing in terms of tuning is going to be fuel and ignition tuning. Now obviously if the car is turbocharged, that's another feature. If the car's got variable valve timing or VTEC or other different technology installed in it, that will benefit obviously the engine's output performance. But the two main things that you are going to be doing is fuel and ignition tuning. Whereas with my EP3, it does have the iVTEC system that basically is VTEC and then variable valve timing. Now it is beneficial if you do have the choice on your car, so that's why the reason I chose the EP3, so I can still do my fuel and ignition, which is going to be pretty much the same for any car that you're going to be tuning. But it does give me the option if I want to learn a little bit more variable valve timing and then learn how to like tune and optimize VTEC system. Now VTEC mostly is going to be like in Hondas, but you might come up with a similar design in another engine, which is basically a low profile cam and then high profile cam, which changes the way the engine breathes, low RPM and then high RPM. As for the variable timing, most modern cars do have variable valve timing. Most of them is going to be on intake system because that's the most effective in terms of power. Some cars do have variable timing on intake and exhaust, for instance like F820 engine on Subis, BMWs, I mean there's loads out there, you know, like the list can go on and on and on. But yeah, if you learn how to do variable tuning on variable valve timing on just intake, exhaust is pretty much the same thing. It's just obviously you got two to kind of like tune together rather than just one on the intake. Pretty much that was the video, guys, kind of like an introduction to like what is EFI and then the platforms you have like to choose from. Me personally, if I'm a beginner, I would go with something NA. If it does have the option of like variable valve timing, like in instance my case with the EP3, and if it's got VTECs, that's a bonus. But yeah, if you just want to focus on just the basics, fuel and ignition, that's fine. Obviously depending what platform you are and then what car you're going to get, it adds to the cost. Same with obviously the capacity of the engine. 2-litre, obviously you're going to be spending a lot more fuel on it rather than like a 1.6 something, for instance. Vice versa, if you like trying to tune like a V8 NA engine, that's like a 4-litre whatever, you know, that's going to add to the cost of money. That is the video, guys. Leave a comment down below, give a thumbs up if you like the video. Any questions that you have, by all means ask. I'll do my best to answer in terms of my experience and knowledge, and I will see you guys in the next video.